So, so many people now. A second meetup about static site generators. That's awesome. So I'm here. I'm from Contentful, and I present another static site generator. Yay! So about metalsmith and myself, I'm Benedikt. I'm working here as JavaScript ecosystem developer. So in case you work with Contentful, I am the reason the JS SDK is still working, or maybe even broken. That's on your judge. So metalsmith, oh my god, that's a lot of code. But actually, that's all of the code. Metalsmith is super small. That's the reason why I actually found myself using it 2 years ago when I was trying to do small websites, like of the hair studio, the last talk I was talking about, or my parents' website and stuff like this. All the stuff you really don't want to bother about. Databases and servers and people hacking your old PHP because they're too lazy to update, because you don't get money for this and all of that. I guess that's why most of us are here. Static site generators don't have these problems. And metalsmith, it's easy. It's super simple and nice to learn. And that's the whole API. That's all you need. It's one file. It's awesome. So a little bit more facts about it. It's from 2014. I guess nowadays you can even say it's old stuff. In regards of JavaScript, at least. It doesn't do much like Hexo, probably. It just takes files, passes it into plugins, and writes some directories. So when you skip out the plugins, you have 300 lines of code. So it takes files from a directory and writes it to another. Amazing. But with all this, it's a super small learning curve. Actually, I claim after this talk, you'll be able to write websites with metalsmith because it's so simple. I have an example inside, and I guess I got pretty much everything covered to write your own little blog or documentation, whatever, with metalsmith. Pretty cool fact, node.js.org is actually written with metalsmith. So might be even business reference, I don't know, I didn't look in detail, but it seems to work, right? And it's not just a static site generator, since it takes one file, one directory, it transforms the files in some way and puts another directory. You can use it for everything. You can even write your ebooks in Markdown and use metalsmith to generate PDFs, EPUB, and all the other weird formats publishers came up with. So people often ask us in the community Slack, hey, is metalsmith still active? There wasn't any update to the repository the last 2 years. And yeah, it is. Interest is rising. And sometimes software doesn't get updates because it works, actually. So it's so simple, so small. There are no bugs discovered for the last 2 years. I'm gonna say it's production ready, I guess. NPM stats, by the way, got really nice new design with fancy graphs, and that would be even animated, but I was too lazy for a GIF. To the lifecycle of metalsmith, it's really simple. I just mentioned it. One directory to the other. In between, it just takes the file and creates a JavaScript object out of it, which contains information like the path of the file, the title, some other metadata you can add, I will talk about in a moment. And we had a front matter actually. And it's super simple. You will see it in a second. After we got these objects of files, it will just pass the files one after each other into the plugins. The plugins do whatever they want with it, like transform content, extract data, whatever. And afterwards, it writes the file in a destination directory. Simple as that. So how does this file object conversation is working? It's pretty simple. You take a Markdown file, you add the front matter setters. In case people don't know what this is, some special characters you can put on top of your file, and you can have a YAML-like definition of data. Like in this case, I put a title to the to the blog post or the example article, and in the end, we will get a map, speaking an object in JavaScript, where the property is actually just a relative path to the file up here, and it contains, most important, the contents of the file, as you can see here, and so the mode of the file, some stats like creation date and so on. And the title here is actually not super magic, it's just a title field from over here, same for the draft. So that's all the data it generates. There's not really much more magic in metalsmith. So when you got this, you got the basic concept already. So the complete API, I can put it on one slide, and you actually just have to care about the use and the build function. All the others are sometimes useful, but they come with same default, so you basically can ignore them in your project. Maybe you want to change the source or destination directory because people like to name the directories as they are used to, so you can just do that. Ignore some files, set a concurrency because you have 20,000 markdown files, and working on 20,000 at one might not be the best on most machines. Can tell it to ignore the front matter, why ever you would do that. And there's the metadata function where you can actually inject metadata into that array we just seen. So anything you passed in here will also end up in these files actually. So that's it. There's the whole API. That's all you can do with metalsmith core. And there's also, for people who don't like to code, there's some CLI. You can pass in a JSON representation of the configuration, and it does all its magic. But since JSON is not really flexible, you can't put in conditions, and I just hate double quotes. Don't use the CLI. It's just in the end pain in the ass, because at some point you want more complexity, and then you have to rewrite it anyways in a JavaScript file, which executes metalsmith. So, because stuff is simple, I straight away start with the example. So I hope after the next 15 slides you're gonna understand why I really like that and why it's so simple. So let's start. npm install. Everybody used to the JavaScript should be aware of npm. It just installs the package, and we already add the first plugin Markdown, which, surprise, renders Markdown in HTML. The whole configuration then would look like this. So you get metalsmith, you get the plugin you want to use, you tell metalsmith, hey, where you should work in, like a working directory. Uname is usually the way to go since you're executing in the directory you're already working at. You pass your preferred names for the source and destination pass. Then the important use function is used, where you just pass in the Markdown plugin, so metalsmith knows to transform Markdown into HTML. You call the build function, important, you have to take care to throw your errors. Metalsmith won't do this for you, and it's very annoying when something runs through and is actually failed and does not tell you it failed, so don't forget to throw the error. To get this running, we need some kind of Markdown file. So my example just looks like this. It has a title, it sets a draft state, and has some Markdown in it. So that's it, let's build. We just execute 5 lines of code, and we end up with following structure. So we have a file where our configuration of metalsmith is in, the actual Markdown content, like you put all the files in here, and it will get an HTML representation in the dist folder later on. And well, that's just the same file as HTML, which was Markdown before. So that's it. We already created our first metalsmith blog. It's pretty simple, but still it rendered a Markdown file to HTML. I have a static site. I have I skipped all the database nonsense and so on, which just is pain for me as dev, and my probably small customers are not willing to pay. But yeah, well, we can't sell this to a customer. So let's take it a little bit further. We want to apply some layout, some basic HTML wrapper around it, maybe some CSS, front-end JavaScript, and so on. So that's actually also pretty simple. So we keep the config from before, and we add 2 new things. That's the metadata function I was talking before. It just adds the page title to the metadata of metalsmith. Here in this example, I just put the page title of my awesome blog, because it's super awesome, and throw the whole stuff, like Markdown is generated before, just for information, and now it's thrown into layouts. With layouts, I tell it actually grabs a layout file, and this file default.pack, and it it passes the content of the generated file into the layout file, and in the end you end up with a whole HTML file. Details following. There's some other configurations, like which pattern of files layout should actually work on, like in metalsmith, since you have the representation of each file as whole file path. plugins can actually check, hey, I should only work on Markdown files. There are even plugins working with CSS files. So with the pattern option, you often make sure, hey, please only transform CSS when it's actually a CSS file. No reason to try and transform HTML to whatever. Directory, because I hate defaults, I just put another directory name. Engine options, you can actually pass configuration to the layout engine. Layout engine? Yeah. A few words about Metalsmith layouts. It's probably one of the most complicated Metalsmith plugins at all, but if you can handle this one, you can handle all of the plugins in Metalsmith universe. So you tell it use default.pug. So for every file that uses default.pug, passes the generated files data into, and it generates a file. But which layout engine should it use? It's kind of dumb even. It just takes the file ending, as you can see here, and puts it into a transformer. It's using JS transformers, which is a super powerful plugin, which just transforms data from one type to the other. You can use it in any project, which is the base for Metalsmith layouts. So it just looks, hey, there's an HBS file. I probably should use a JS transformer handlebars for it, and it throws the data into. There's even TypeScript transformer, because why not? The documentation is a little bit hard to grasp, so I will upload a slide, so all the blue stuff is actually a link. In the source code, you have a JSON file, which actually tells you which file endings are actually supported. So when you go further as handlebars or Pug or TypeScript or some other stuff, you can actually look up what's available. I just, for layouting, I prefer Pug. If somebody likes what they see in the next slides, pug.js.org is where you have to look at to understand and fully grasp Pug. So how does such a layout file look like? We have some header. I pass Bootstrap and highlight.js and initialize it in a super dirty, hacky way. Probably not the way to do it. In my example, I even use a CDN just to throw the stuff into. You probably want to go with static CSS and JS files. But for now, it's good for the demo. We have some header. Important here is the page title we just defined is output on this position, and the title for the actual article is also here just available as variables. So all the metadata in your Metalsmith plugins, they're just available in the templates too, so you can just output the data. Most important part is the contents variable, which actually contains the content of the generated file. So it takes our generated HTML from the markup, creates all the wrapping stuff you usually need, and puts the content in. And that's it. So you have a layout, throw the markdown in, and it's done. Let's build. We're already done with configuration and layout. It generates now pretty the same file. Again, we additionally have the default pack file, which is our layout file. And the output is like this. So instead of just some plain HTML, we actually have our content down here. It's actually the p tag here, and all of the other stuff is generated by the layout file. That way, we always have the same layout on any post. We just throw markdown files and always get a nice HTML wrapper around it. What it looks like this. We're already getting closer to a real blog, thanks to Bootstrap mostly, and the HTML header and body. So that's nice, but my blog actually just consists of one post, and you won't get really a lot of visitors when your site never has been coded. So let's iterate over multiple blog posts, show them on a start page, and have a detail page of the blog post itself, where you can even navigate between the older and newer blog posts, which is all done magically by the collections plugin. So Metalsmith collections here. Excerpts is just a little helper. It extracts the first paragraph out of an entry and puts it as excerpt, or teaser text is also pretty commonly used text. So, because when I list my blog posts, I don't want the full content. I just want a small piece of the content to tease the actual content. So I tell collections, hey, take anything that's in the folder articles, ending with HTML. It's markdown, but the markdown processing already runs, so the MD files actually become HTML files. That's why HTML here. Order it by date. and reverse true to have the latest one on top. The rest you have already seen. Here's layouts, up here is markdown conversion, build metalsmith, that's it. You know it, like nine lines of metalsmith configuration. Maybe a little bit more, but you get what I mean. So the default file changed a little. We now have a layout file, which gets used by multiple other layout files, just to have different structures of the pages. I added some awesome menu to it, 2 buttons for home and about, just to make sure I have a menu, which will then show on any page of the website. For the article itself, I just extend my layout. An important part, I highlighted again, like it puts out the content, of course, and at the bottom, collections actually adds a next and previous entry to the metadata, which already contains the link to the last and the next blog post. It's actually not a link, it's a representation of the same object. So I just access the next article and give me its path, which represents in this configuration the same path in the folder, which translates the same in the browser. So we already have buttons for next and previous. For the index file, collections does another thing. It actually groups all the articles and the metadata into the collections attribute or property, which contains for every collection you defined. Just going back. It's like this, we define the collection here, articles with that pattern. So we end up on collections articles, and this is just an array of articles, exactly the same objects you have on top level. It contains the title again, the excerpt we generated with the small excerpt plugin, and a button to the path to read more about the blog. So 2 more additions to the markdown itself. You need to tell it, please use the article layout, otherwise it will go back to the default pack and skips our next and previous buttons, what we actually want. What we don't want, so we need the layout, and I add a date just to make sure I have control over the order when my blog posts actually appear on the website, and markdown, of course. So let's build again, and that's what we're ending up with. Looks like a little bit more, but actually it's just because I have now 2 articles within an article folder, and I added index and about with some real text on the index page and some other lorem ipsum on the about page. My layouts got also a little bit more complex. The default is still the one for the fallback, so the about page would use a very simple layout. The index one is there to iterate over my blog posts. I have a list of blog posts, and the article one is the one for the article, which mostly gives us the next and previous button. They all are like extending the layout one. And as a result, I totally forgot to change the file ending here. It should be .html, of course, in the list folder, and you have to HTML file. The index.js. Okay, okay, happens. So the result, cool. We have just a few more lines of configuration and 3 more layouts. I have a blog with a menu, which is on all pages. I have a list of my blog posts with an excerpt or teaser text out of it, and when I click the button, I end up on such an article which has a previous button and the next button, depending on if there's any or not. And that's it, 15 lines of metalsmith for layouts and the content files, and we build a blog. Of course, CSS and so on, you know about the hustle, it's always fun. But yeah, that's it. metalsmith is really simple, and I hope this was a good demonstration about how little effort you can already create a website with metalsmith. Good. It's simple. Illicity also comes with some problems. There are no dev tools, not really. Like maybe you know React, they give you a lot of dev tools, but with metalsmith, there's only a small trick I will come later to. I'm sorry. First of all, when you're creating a website, it's always nice. You create some code, you run the build process, you reload the browser, you see what you get. That's funny for 5 times, and then you get annoyed, me at least. I really want the stuff to have it automated. When I save code, I want my browser automatically to reload, so I don't waste a few seconds in between switching windows and stuff. So you can automate this with metalsmith. First of all, there's metalsmith Rotsch. Don't use it. It just causes problems with other plugins. Just skip that. It's even a note in the official metalsmith Slack. With Node 1 and browser sync, which are pretty basic Node modules, you you can already achieve the same behavior within like 5 minutes of configuration, not even. So you tell nodemon is a tool which automatically reruns your node file when the file changed. So instead of node index.js, you just write nodemon index.js, hit enter, and every time you change the source code of your node file, it will get re-executed, so you don't have to go to the terminal again, type the command, press enter, or press key up if you're advanced and press enter. Processing is a small server which actually runs your directory you pass into it, and it injects small JavaScript snippets. And every time you rerun metalsmith, browsersync will detect that this directory changed and sends a small information to the browser. Hey, there's a new version of that page available. How about reloading? And boom, your browser reloads, and you have the changes already on your browser. I'm pretty sure that this technique works for almost any static site generator. It's not only tied to metalsmith. And some people still tend to use Skype and Grunt and wrap them around metalsmith. That's all way too much complexity. Skip that part, write it one line of code and put it into your NPM scripts, and you're good. There's no need for complex build systems and stuff. It will just be the pain you try to get rid of. So yeah, for the more advanced people, it works with Webpack. With a little bit of effort, actually pretty good. Most important part, keep Webpack and metalsmith separated. I guess that's also valid for most of the static site generators. Let the static site generator do what it's supposed to, generate static files out of some content files, and using Webpack separate to generate your CSS and JS files. And later on, use a plugin, like in this case, in case of metalsmith assets, just copy your CSS and your JS files into the dist directory in the destination directory, and use the files as you would have typed them by hand. So you avoid crazy reloading conflicts and stuff of that. If you still want to use the fully blown dev experience, I created a suite down here on GitHub. I put it on GitHub, which already lets Webpack and metalsmith run at the same time. And you can hack like all the files, no matter if content files, metalsmith configuration, CSS files, and JS files. You just change, hit save, and hopefully half a second later, your changes are already seen in the browser, so you don't have to worry. Within my suite, you got that configurations file of metalsmith. There you hack into the rest, just leave it as it is, and you will have all the magic without worrying about how to develop with your stuff. Last part about developing with metalsmith. Plugins are simple. Plugins are just a function, actually. So for a plugin, you pass in some options. You can do whatever you want with them and return another function, which is the actual plugin or the function that gets executed when the plugin is called. And it just gets all the files of metalsmith, an instance of metalsmith, and the done function. The files is that object I showed in the beginning, which just as parameter, as property as the pass, and then within the pass, we just have that object with title, contents of the file, the stats, the creation date, and so on. So you can iterate over all the files you get. You can use multi-match based on the pattern I was talking about, just to make sure you only handle CSS files, image tag files, whatever, and then you apply your fancy magic, whether on the metadata of the file or on that contents buffer, which is inside. There are even plugins that take images and show it into ImageMint to minify these images and make them small, nice, or resize them. If you write your own plugin, really important, it's async, so you have to call the done function either immediate after this one call stack or just when you're done with your promises, magic, whatever. JavaScript offers a lot for async. Call the done function to tell metalsmith, hey, I'm done with working on the files. So that's how you write a plugin. Debugging metalsmith. As I told before, small static site generator, not that much that developer tooling around, but there's debug. Node debug. Node debug is actually used a lot in the Node ecosystem, so that might be valid for a lot of other stuff you're doing in JavaScript. You can set a debug environment variable, and either press star, or for in case of metalsmith, just metalsmith and a star, and it will, when you execute the file, output a lot of debug information. It's even color coded, and you get some timing information, how long stuff took, and so on. It's awesome to debug, even for plugins outside of the metalsmith environment. It accepts commas and a star, just for information. Yeah, metalsmith debug gives some extra debugging, but you do not need metalsmith debug to actually use debug. Most of the plugins just work out of the box. Define debug equals metalsmith star, and you get all the data you want to look at. Then this is nice with the output, but it's painful to read if you got more data. So Levi, a really smart guy from the community, created a debug UI which actually just generates some HTML files which contain or show you all the metadata and the files with the metalsmith. So if you wonder what's actually going on there, which data is around, how can I access that one title within the article, and I don't want to make weird stuff in a template engine to give me the data, just run the debug UI. It's one plugin, 30 seconds to set up, and you can open the stuff like you're used to from the developer console in Chrome. Super useful. Then a list I was told, which is way too long. I was expecting this, but there are more than 200 plugins from metalsmith around. The ecosystem is huge. There are a few black sheeps in the plugins around, and you probably find out after using they are not really working or whatever. I will upload the slides, so I keep the next two short. It's like a long list I put together, grouped by category, what stuff you really can use. I either used it by myself or checked out at least the source code to make sure it's really useful. Like with these plugins, you pretty much get all the stuff done. You can include YouTube, discuss stuff. There are integrations of several companies. With project images, you can just put images next to your Markdown files and will automatically attach the images to the metadata of that one file. So you just access images, array, iterates through it, and all your images are listed. You can have a look in detail. There's even a second slide of lists. Like, there are way more plugins. Just a few I want to highlight. As said, I upload the slides. It's all links. A few last hints. You have that use function. It's really important in which order you put in the plugins. metalsmith is simple, but that can also cause problems. For example, you transform the Markdown in a very late state, but before have some plugins working with HTML files. It won't work because your stuff stays Markdown till it actually hits the Markdown plugin and stuff like that. So most of the time when stuff is not working, you just mixed up the order of the plugins. Just think about it again in which order it should actually happen, and stuff will work. If you ever come by any pass, pattern, whatever, metalsmith always uses multi-match, so you can use globbing and some other small tricks to make pass and matches for several files. In case people don't know, that would mean within articles, in any folder within articles, give me a file that has the ending of Markdown, so you can have your own structure. Globbing can really help in that case. So, short about the hosting. We already were introduced to Netlify, also one of my favorites, really good one. S3 can help with some hidden pricing, which can be funny. North-Edge also supports some static site generators. It's also just like a 1 minute setup and your stuff is hosted. And if you take care of, if you care about where your data stays, you can recommend Uberspace. It's a non-profit organization from Germany. They have the data in Germany, and they're doing an awesome job. And it's also really, really simple to set up static sites and even other stuff with Uberspace. Some resources for the end. The metalsmith website itself, it's pretty long if you looked at it. It started as a small website. Over time, there was no really somebody taking care of it in detail. People just merging in pull requests with more information about metalsmith. It's an awesome resource of information. Just be prepared. It's a really long single-page website without navigation between the points. There's an awesome metalsmith list, as most of the awesome lists. Check it out. A lot of important information about metalsmith. And if you're stuck, join us on the metalsmith Slack. Like, some of the core contributors are around. They're helping out. When you gotta wait, keep in mind metalsmith is mostly used in the US. We're in Europe, it's 8 hours time difference to the West Coast, so might take some time till people actually stand up of bed and can answer your questions. So, but for now, any questions here in the room?
You did see my earlier talk, didn't you? You know I have a problem with static site generators. I'm going to have to look at this one now.
I looked also in many, and for like back that time, I really wanted to get rid of a lot of customers I had on Drupal running because I didn't pay for updates, server costs, or whatever. They just wanted to have a basic website and do 2 changes per year. It's really not a use case for CMS. And I wanted something I can actually just do the stuff and not have to learn a lot of stuff. So metalsmith, I can learn writing plugins within 2 minutes. So it's awesome.
Why do you hate double quotes?
Because they just make my text longer and I have a small screen. It's personal preference.
Should we start the semicolons?
Oh, yeah, please.
Hi, is it like when you're using Pug, that there's a template extension? So you can use the word like extend like Django to take an existing template and then just extend it to you want to change. Is that basically the same thing? Is that how it works for Pug?
That's how it works for Pug. Pug has this implemented space part of the language. Like, Pug is really awesome. It just gives you what you need and not other lot bullshit. It's kind of metalsmith. It's small, that's what it needs, but not too much. And I find the syntax really readable with that intention style. Just yeah, like this.
It's like the best bits of Django and the best bits of Hammer, all in one language. It's fantastic.
You're welcome. It was called Jade in the past, but they got some legal issues, so they had to rename it themselves. But it's the same.
Hello.
Hi.
Does this collections plugin support text?
Text?
Yes, like tagging posts and shows information by text.
Thanks.
No, I think not, but there's a metalsmith tag plugin I listed, which I'm pretty sure is able to do that. I was doing simple stuff with that, so have a look into it. Yeah. Here we call this tag your posts, I guess, that offers a kind of similar functionality as collections, just based on text. I hope I'm right. Not sure. Yeah, somebody else?